Hello and welcome to the Boostara podcast. I am your host, James. At the Boostara podcast, we meet leaders in business and education and uncover the truths and insights from their amazing experiences. If you want to learn more about how to leverage AI for your own business, then please type the word growth into the comments below and I'll be sure to reach out. Today, we are joined by, I kind of feel like a bit of a celebrity in the football and the AI world. Just my kind of feeling, my kind of read on this this conversation. The amazing Chris Perry from Machine Football. Hello, Chris.
Hello. What an introduction. Thank you. Yeah, lovely to be here.
Chris, firstly, where are you calling us from?
Yeah, Cobham, just outside of London.
Okay. Okay, not the international context that we've had a bit recently, but we're at different ends of the country.
Yeah, rainy Surrey. Probably that's what we have in common. It's rainy and yeah, a little dull this morning.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, I've given you a bit of an introduction there as a celebrity. I mean, Chris, could you, for those of our listeners that aren't familiar with who you are, could you give us a bit of an introduction to yourself, Machine Football, and how you've kind of found yourself to where you are, sort of position-wise now?
Well, look, yeah, thank you. Yeah, and again, thank you for having me. So, celebrity is probably not quite right, but yeah, I guess kind of the thing is I've been around for quite a long time, so have done a few things. My kind of initial career was with my partner at the time, a guy called Neil Miller, and we built a business from two of us to be Razorfish in the UK, and then sold that to Microsoft. So we went through really 14 years of that first bit of the internet, really working with some of the most amazing clients and building some of the most amazing things, including we basically did the back end to the first iPhone. So that really dates me, which we built all the technology for that. We built all the technology for the Financial Times newsroom, and essentially we're one of those kind of early companies that went all the way through to a very interesting exit, and were part of Microsoft for a long time. That was kind of my first thing. I spent a lot of time in WPP, really working with Mark Reed and creating a kind of a standalone product to really simplify first-party data for their large clients, which, to be perfectly honest, was a little bit ahead of its time. This was kind of 2010, and actually, it was all about simplifying. And I think that's kind of the theme in all of this technology, which is how do you make it simpler, how do you make it faster, how do you make it work for people. And then after that, I was involved in the quantum space, really very early in that, which is obviously the next generation after kind of AI, and it's all the stuff that's just around the corner, which is interesting. So as an investor in Cambridge Quantum Computing, which I'm an enormous admirer of, and they're now just part of Honeywell and called Continuum. So that's a super interesting business as well. And then I've worked with other agencies. I've worked kind of globally building kind of digital technology and cultural products, and that's really led to my partnership now with Graham So, the England football player and commentator, and really his inspiration and my inspiration came together at a wonderful time to kind of create an AI football business, which is Machine Football.
Okay. I mean, just leading off of Machine Football, what sort of inspired you to go into that direction for this venture?
It's there's a love of football in there. I think there's Graham, who is both a friend and my business partner, and his view of football, both as the technical co-commentator for NBC and as well, obviously a kind of long-term both player and consultant in the game. I think he looks at the game in a very interesting way. One of our head of AI said to him that you could have been a theoretical physicist if if he hadn't been a football player. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But the way of breaking down the movement and the systems and the way people interact together is a very interesting challenge. And most of football and most of the kind of thinking so far has been about stats and about counting what people do, as opposed to evaluating the quality and the systems and using all the layers of AI to really break that down and layer those things on top of each other to understand how people, which is obviously the most important thing in football, work together. And then, and how that works, within what is a very interesting market. There's a lot of inefficiencies. There's a lot of opportunity in the investment side of things and the player trading and the recruitment side of things. If you look at the market differently, and then within that, how do you really, help investors and clubs to really kind of create alignment around that way of thinking, and so that final bit is really all about helping again people to kind of use these technologies as support rather than replace them. The whole thing about AI and these new technologies is quite often they leave you with a feeling of really being kind of almost disassociated and completely unempowered. It's like they're going to do everything, and and football is the last place that will ever happen. Football is all about people. It's all about the way we see things and the way we think and the way we work together. So putting AI and the way Graham thinks and that challenge together is just a proper brain stretching, interesting place to be. And that was really the inspiration of it. And it's wrapped in the idea that actually we can do good for football. That was probably Graham's initial stake in the ground, which is how do we help particularly young players? How do we help clubs? How do we add something to the game? Because he has spent so much time in the game. It has been incredibly good to him, and he wanted to give something back.
Amazing. And I guess for most people watching and listening, if they're coming at it from the sports sort of observer kind of point of view, they'll know, or even the participation point of view. Someone like myself, I do marathon running, more so than football. I like watching football, but I'm a runner by heart. And anyone involved with sport knows that to become that top percent, there's such marginal differences. Marginal gains can be the difference between a third place in the table and the top of the table, right? I guess my question is with AI, with like machine football and bringing in the business aspect of things, is that a marginal gain that it can bring for football clubs that translates on the field from off the field? Because both business of football and on the field participation, on the field performance are quite sort of intertwined, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. My sense is there's kind of a few angles to that that's probably worth unpacking. There's obviously the business of football, which is an important context to the performance within football, and actually not many people join those two things together in the most optimal way. There is obviously in terms of constructing a club environment, there is a lot of components and moving components in order to get that marginal gains, that marginal performance on the pitch. And actually, we're looking at how to join all those elements together in order to create the system that then the individuals within that system can perform to the absolute peak of their ability. So to your point, the marginal gains element is really kind of the full context of how do you provide an environment for people to do the very best they possibly can. And data within that context is super interesting, because football is one of those games where a lot of people have heard about Moneyball, that's kind of nearly 10, 15 years ago.
Mm.
Moneyball was about finding players that were unrecognized, unloved, perhaps using kind of relatively simple statistics, because at the end of the day, baseball is a game which has kind of less components than football.
Mm.
Now you have AI, and you kind of fast forward to where we are today. It's basically a complex environment of individuals and systems and potential outcomes. And that is what AI is amazing at. That's what AI is better than where we used to be with kind of data modeling and statistics. And so putting all those layers together allows you to think about them at the same time, that would be very difficult for any one person to do.
Mm.
It's still going to obviously come down to, how people feel. It's still going to come down to how the coach works. But again, for instance, when we look at, say, for instance, the model we've created of every single one of the 2,000 teams, you look at those 2,000 teams and you say, actually, you can break them down into very specific playing styles, and you can plan your playing style and your coaching style and your performance in a much more joined up way with who you're recruiting. And
Mm.
and that granularity of how you put all those things together is quite difficult to do. You can definitely have the conversation, but actually having the data at the beginning of that conversation to reference, to think about, to then join up to what you're seeing, kind of eyes on, which is obviously the most important thing. But it's those sort of things that the machine does particularly well, in terms of just creating that thread of thinking that says, this is how we're going to play. This is how we're going to play most efficiently with the budget we have and the players we have and the league we're in. And then this is the way in which we're going to basically set up. This is the way we're going to work together as a system. And this is the way we're going to essentially recruit against that system. And this is how we're going to develop our academy and youth system and pipeline of players into that system. Is the way we think about it, and there's only very few, one or two clubs that do that. PSG would be one of them, where the result of thinking like this allows you to take, say, for instance, your front three off and put another front three on, who are almost exactly the same in terms of level of quality, and they fit into the system. And it's those sort of things that you can do at layers of the game which don't have as much money as PSG. If you think about it in that sort of structured way.
That's amazing. What would you say then with machine football? What's the most sort of distinctive feature that you have, that if clubs were to adopt machine football, what's the most distinctive feature that you have, or maybe change that they might see?
Well, what we do is we have something like 1 billion touches of the football now over the last 10 years. We have every transfer, and we have the financial public records of I think the top 40-50% of clubs. So you have an overarching model. We put that into a simulation, so you can understand and simulate a player into your club that has never played with that team, and
Wow.
understand how they would basically work and fit, both stylistically and performance wise, and what that's likely to mean for your performance on a points per game basis and a position basis. So that simulation is the end of a load of other things that obviously are kind of key components and bits of thinking. But to your point about distinctiveness, being able to bring it all together and have that as a conversation in real time, virtually. We're looking at this player, we're looking at this player. Who fits best? What's the outcome? What's the difference in terms of money and future value on the pitch and future value as a player? What does that look like? That for us makes a lot of difference day to day.
And I guess in that, some people might think, well, then does that take away the need for having a coach? If you can just get AI to make all these decisions. But I guess that to answer that, it's not, right. It's just complementing. It's complementing decisions. It's making decisions run faster and smoother. Yeah, would you say?
Yeah, and I think that's accurate and fair. Obviously there's the the kind of sporting director and the whole management and coaching structure and team. And actually what you're not trying to do is replace any of them. You're just trying to make information that, say, for instance, that no one's probably going to know as well as the data does the Brazilian football market. Okay, let's have a think about that today, and think about what we, it's the things you can't see, but the human factors. And I think I mentioned this when we started. Those human factors are the key thing. They're never going to be replaced. It's about how people feel, how people set up, how you communicate, how you really think about the people opposite you. All those things are the most important things. But actually having that all underpinned by a comprehensive view of both the players, the marketplace, and the teams that you're setting up against is that little marginal gain that we think makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And that runs in line with a lot of the conversations we've had recently with people that see AI as a sort of a more ground level working staff might worry about it in terms of replacing their jobs. At a higher sort of director, CIO, CEO level, it's about leveraging AI to take away the admin tasks so that you can actually have more time spent on your higher value activities, which would generally be conversations, generally inspiring you in football, inspiring your team, getting to know your players, right? Putting them on the right track mentally, physically, right? If you can get a tool that will do all of the data calculations for you, so you can get out of your notebook and actually talk to people, then that's valuable, right? That's valuable for clubs, and that is I would say probably that gain, that marginal gain, right? That can be the difference.
And I think you touch on a really interesting point about where we are in the AI journey, the hype cycle. It feels to me like we're at the top of the hype cycle. And, it could go either way. There's a whole thing that says, okay, well, we're totally going to be replaced by AI, and actually there's no requirement for us to do anything else ever. And then there's a view which I think will pervade for a long time, and I tend to believe in, which is it's additive and it's infrastructure, and it's things that we can build, really fascinating, interesting opportunities on top of. And for me, that's the version that I'm most interested in. There's a lot of conversation about the other piece, but that could well be self-serving. A lot of the LLM kind of conversation says, well, okay, we are going to do everything for you. And I do believe in where we're heading, but I think there's kind of timelines with technology which always provide opportunities. And for the next 20, 30 years, there's still lots of opportunities in my view.
Absolutely. And in terms of football specifically, I mean, have you been surprised with the way that football clubs have adopted the likes of machine football, or what surprised you the most about the way that they have adopted or haven't adopted? Because I mean, I'm coming from the perspective of, rightly or wrongly, football being a bit of a late adopter in like VAR technology, where other sports kind of adopted quite quickly, or it made sense to them. I know it's a contentious issue, right? But what surprised you most about the way that football clubs have taken on machine football?
No surprises hugely. I think with technology in some environments, you have to recognize always the expert opinion, and I think that's right. It's right in football. There's a book called Super Crunchers which talks about essentially the sommelier as an expert, and how you're unlikely to replace a sommelier with a data system, because at the end of the day you could predict the geography, basically the geology, the weather, and probably get a very good view of wine, but actually no one wants that. You basically want the expert, and I think football is the same. So working with those experts and basically breaking down the problem and then playing it back in data is one of the most rewarding things that we've done. Basically it kind of often starts as a question which says, okay, what have you got? It then becomes a brief to like, okay, how can this help? But actually then it becomes very supportive, because actually one of the key things is how to get the, say, for instance, the investor and the commercial and business side of football lined up with what the manager and the coach want to do, and actually doing that in the same language and doing that in a way that's aligned. And so it tends to go through that arc, which again I think is very rewarding. It isn't an arc that says, here's a piece of technology, press the buttons and see what the it's a conversation, it's a piece of support. But because again what we've tried to do is make the data part of the conversation rather than the end of the conversation, i.e. speed, it's actually quite a straightforward conversation, which is as soon as you start working in a conversational manner, you get to a place which is easier. So your point about, I guess, challenges is selling and talking technology and change to any group is interesting, and it's something that I've put myself in the middle of for 25, 30 years now, but it's probably it's actually the most interesting version of it that I've actually been involved in. So yeah, it's very interesting.
What would you say then? What are the misconceptions that you're seeing from football club owners, investors that have maybe you've approached or have approached you, in taking on machine football? What are the misconceptions that you're kind of seeing from them about what they'll get from machine football?
Well, I think probably the most interesting one is the subtlety and the difference in data. Because there's a lot of numbers in football. Everyone talks about numbers, everyone has a point of view on numbers, and some numbers are better than others, and therefore, helping work through that, and I think for me, it's a case of going back to go forward. So, for instance, a lot of stats are about counting things. It's about how many times did someone do something. But when you stand back, actually, how many times you did something. If I was to get on the pitch and kick the ball 5 times, it would be very different to someone with a high level of skill, which I do not have. So that number is not actually valuable as a data point. It has to be an evaluation and a performance number that kind of aligns, and we call it a continuous number, with a number of variables that lead to outcomes. So it's essentially unpicking the fact that how many times someone did something, so you can compare someone else who did something the same amount of times to actually saying, look, how well did they do something? What's that likely to lead to in terms of their basically quality within the context of the whole market? And that in itself is a difficult challenge, which no one really seems to have encountered, which is, how do you understand, if I'm playing in one league, how it compares to another league, which is very difficult for anything other than machine learning to do. So that's another big kind of challenge and actually thing that we've got over. And then how well would they work together in order to do that? So the misconception is just because you have numbers, do you have the right numbers? And I think that conversation is a super interesting conversation, but something that we've been spending a lot of time on.
Interesting. What would you then give as advice for any football club looking to adopt sort of AI technology such as yourself?
Well, there's obviously a lot of desire within football to get more information, more data, and to build data-driven organizations, which does make sense, and to your point about marginal gains, that would not be a new thing for clubs to be thinking about.
Yeah.
I think the challenge and things within the machine learning space that people haven't realized is, within a club, you don't have enough data to get much machine learning signal. The data is too small. Data at scale is what you need in order for engines to learn and understand properly. And so if you look at your club and say, right, I'm going to basically do a lot of machine learning, or I'm going to do a lot of kind of high level data processing to create an advantage rather than just organizing it into the same place. If you want to go to that next level, it's difficult. You actually need a kind of global context. And so our desire is to provide that global context as a platform and then let people build whatever they want within that context, within that benchmark, within that way of thinking, and use the models, use the data, use the APIs, and build whatever they want on top of that. So I think there's a challenge to from a software perspective within clubs as well. Clubs are not naturally software environments, and so how you manage, how far you want to go with the software, with how far you want to go with the opportunity in these technologies, to how you then build your domain and your expertise and your institutional knowledge. That's the key question for clubs to be thinking about. And again, where those lines come, I think is one, it's very much a bespoke thing for each club. And that's how we look at it, which is a platform and then bespoke.
I guess for a lot of football clubs, it's going to be a bit of a balancing act as to
exactly
where they put their time and energy and resources, money, right? They've got to balance that all out. Still, it's true that AI it's not disappearing. It is only going to become more mainstream.
Yeah, and there isn't enormous amounts of free flowing cash within football clubs. So actually doing it, I think you pick up on a really good point. Doing it as efficiently as possible is the other part of that, which is, as you say, there's a balancing act, and then there's how do I do this most efficiently, because we need to be here. And some of the most interesting things are when there's big change like relegation and promotion. For instance, as you get promoted as a club, one of the things is you quite often need to change your whole system and recruit heavily in order to recognize your different role within that new league. You may have gone from winning 23 to 25 matches to winning 7 to 10. And to being in it, and those are different systems, and actually recognizing that efficiently, recognizing that quickly, recognizing that immediately is again something you can't build. It's something that's quite important to understand and find ways of just basically doing that off the shelf and then build from there.
Exactly. I think, needless to say, with AI, I was going to say, are you a supporter, a skeptic? No, you're you're a supporter, obviously. But I think the impacts that AI is and will have within football, we basically touched upon throughout this conversation. But I'm curious, as to someone at your level as CEO, how is the use of AI technology having an impact on the way that you're working, sort of day to day? How has that changed now, as opposed to, you said, 25 years ago? So compared to 25 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously within the context of growth and sales, there's very clear and straightforward use cases, and so we've applied as many as we possibly can there, and I think those are going stronger and they're more interesting day by day. So there's that side of things. I think in terms of our business process, we base everything we do around the platform. So there's some interesting challenges with how you begin to do consulting around a platform. And we've spent quite a lot of time understanding both the kind of MCP layer, the essentially the language layer, and actually then how you then use that system to generate content and conversations that are off platform. And that's work in progress, but super interesting. And then that goes full circle to both growth and content distribution. So again, what we're trying to do is someone said it to me: anytime you do something more than 3 times, you should automate. And that kind of is something that sits within what we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's I'm gonna have to take that as my own mantra now. to
Well, I
remind
stole it from
myself.
to be perfectly honest, I stole it from someone else. So, but it's a great
Yeah,
truism.
that's no, that's brilliant. That's yeah, I'm going to write that on my computer. Just what would you say, Chris? Then for machine football, what's the future got in store for you guys? Where are you headed yourself and machine football in the next kind of 5 years?
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I genuinely don't know, but I think the idea of having a very interesting data set in one of the most interesting markets in the world gives us a lot of opportunity for both innovation. The team around me is a team that I've worked with now again for 15, 20 years who are amazing. And then our head of AI basically came off his master's studying black holes and quantum gravity. And that combination kind of gives you an opportunity to find stuff that can't even imagine, which I genuinely like. I think the answer would be I'd love to kind of put a stake in the ground for AI for good. That's what I really want to do with it.
Mm.
I'd love to do more consumer stuff with what we're doing. I think there's a lot of content here that would be well utilized within both kind of fan bases and kind of the consumer world. And I think it's a great playground for making a difference quickly. It makes a difference every week in football.
Yeah.
So actually, that's pretty good feedback loop. Because in business it tends to take a lot longer. So that space and how we do is intriguing. So it's a kind of fluffy answer to watch the space, but it's as I said, I think at the beginning, it's a really brain stretching space.
Curious to ask, could machine football become machine rugby, machine tennis, or is it strictly football?
No, definitely. I would very much like to go that direction, and I think we will. So yes, I think that's absolutely where we would go. I'm a big rugby fan, so definitely kind of look at rugby. But there's a range of team sports which are well placed to do this, and things like NFL are particularly interesting because of the structured play within that as well. So there's as you say, there's a lot to go for.
Yeah, a lot of opportunity out there. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned I'm a big runner. The one of the frustrations I have, although I mean the tech is amazing. It's from when I was running 15, 20 years ago as a youngster to now. We never had all of this tech, all of these predictors. I don't want to name brands, but one of the frustrations I have is when I look at my predicted time for a 10K or a marathon, and it's about 2 minutes out of what I'm actually looking to get. So if you could come into that space and give more accurate predictions, but I suppose it's different sports present completely different challenges, and just like what you were saying, the team sports, individual sports in itself, they're completely different worlds, right?
So basically, you want a prediction that makes you feel better. Is that where you're at? Yeah. Okay. I got it. Yeah. Okay.
Or realistic, because for example, I ran I ran 2 hours 23 London Marathon last year, and
wow.
my watch
Okay.
straight afterwards told me predicted time 3 hours 10. It's like, well, maybe now, yeah, after I've just done 2 hours 23, maybe that's as much as I could do if I did it straight away. But even beforehand, it was a good 15 minutes, 20 minutes off of what I was actually looking to achieve.
Tell you what you've done there though is so obviously what you're looking at is a distribution, aren't you? And you're in the unusual part of the distribution. And so it finds it very difficult to predict at a general level what you're doing and how you're performing.
Right.
So actually what you're highlighting there is a really interesting thing about high perform. 2 hours 23 is not normal. It's just not. But within a distribution, 3 hours, 3 hours 30 is elite. So actually what you're saying there is how do I kind of get the marginal gains at the 2 hours 23 to 2 hours to under 2 hours 20, And that's where you move beyond statistical distribution to a whole load of other kind of layers, which is again kind of the same sort of problem we're talking to. I think it's the analogy is actually quite interesting, although I can't help you with the answer.
Okay. Brilliant. Well, Chris, it's been absolutely amazing to have you on. A real pleasure to have this conversation.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone for listening.